Hello and welcome to the Dublin Conversations. Viola, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm Vi Hazlerigg. I am a senior creative at the Romans. Previously a strategist, previously an accounts person, got up to SAM, but have worked for nearly 8 years now in PR and kind of creative comms. So really excited to have this conversation. No, there's lots of rich things to unpick. So
Let's begin the journey.
let's do it.
Thank you. So, let's say beginning the 5 steps. The step one is to recognise that after living, eating, using your senses, one of the most fundamental of human functions is how we manage the perceptions of future behaviours.
Mm.
And at the heart of that is this idea of confidence, defining confidence as a reliable expectation of subsequent reality rather than the general use of confidence, meaning in a self-confident way. And this confidence exists at 5 levels, so that you have confidence in your perception of reality, that what you're perceiving, you have confidence is real and reliable. You have confidence in your purpose, of what you're here for, and why you're here, and then you need to earn confidence in others, and others have to have confidence in you in order to socially interact. And then there's others around you need to have confidence in each other. And there's largely a zeitgeist confidence at the time. So, for example, economic business confidence and so on. So, as I say, but we believe that purpose provides an effective way, an authentic purpose of making this task of earning confidence easier by enabling you to be more coherent and compelling, to tell a more understandable story to yourself and others. So, I just wonder any thoughts on this sort of being this step one here, Viola.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really, really valid point. I think I'll probably speak from a brand perspective,
Yeah.
knowing that, that's normally the task at hand in the job that we do. But I think in terms of confidence with your purpose, it's so key to everything you do. I mean, as an individual as well, but as a brand. I think, I've got a couple of good examples of this where a client will come to you and say, Pride Month is coming up. We really want to talk to the LGBTQI community, or, this has happened in the news cycle and we really want to help in some way. And I think there's in comms often, because purpose has become so integral to client briefs, often clients don't have the foresight of seeing which purpose they truly as a business should have the confidence to speak about, which is why we've seen brands being tarnished with the sticker of rainbow washing or green washing, when they speak about certain environmental issues when they shouldn't, and they're not completely buttoned up when it comes to saving the world. So it's really, really integral. And I think it's, like understanding the areas in terms of purpose that a business has the ability to speak to and has done things in the past with. And then also in understanding the perception of the consumer on the brand in terms of the sort of business they are and the things that they should stand up in. So that covers off, obviously, the confidence in your purpose and the perception of that kind of reality of the brand world and where you're living. But also, the confidence that they have in you. And I guess the spirit of the times as well, in terms of that zeitgeist, the news agenda is so dense at the moment that when it comes to purpose, that there's so much that businesses should be doing, and it's not possible to do everything. And so it's really finding, as you say, that place of confidence around the central purpose, the one thing that primarily the business stands for, that they can then kind of hang their hat on, but also make tangible change in solving. Because jack of all trades, master of none. Like if you try and help everyone in the world, you end up actually helping nobody,
Yeah.
and not even yourself. And so I don't know, I think in terms of confidence as well, what's really nice when you're kind of working in a brand is someone once said to me, being harder in your work makes you harder on your thinking. And I think that's a really true thing, particularly when it comes to the world of purpose, is you really need to kind of sit down and actually look at every element of a business, from internal communications or the way they look after their employees to, every quote, every kind of spokesperson interview, every campaign they've ever done, every community they've ever supported, and really work out kind of, which purpose they can speak to authentically, and thus they should, and which ones actually, they don't have a place to speak in, and therefore shouldn't.
Yeah. So some profound overview you've established there, and connecting with the idea of brand. And I think you raised an interesting question there of the role of purpose. Is purpose a subset of brand, or does brand a subset of purpose? There's one view that maybe that purpose is your fundamental foundation stone, and
Mm.
brand is a like conceptual tool to help explain and package how you see yourself and who you are in your context. So I just wonder, any thoughts about that? You know, sort of brand, purpose subset of brand, or brand subset of purpose. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, totally. I think, but when we as comms professionals, if you receive a brief saying we want to strive for a purpose, normally it's kind of like a CSR purpose, right? It's helping a group. Obviously, every brand at its core has a purpose, which is why it exists. So kind of both are true in a sense. The purpose of the brand probably comes first when the business plan is made, and then the business kind of forms because there's a gap. And then, on the flip, every brand once established will then have something that they're striving to achieve. So in a funny sort of way, I think both are true, but one comes kind of after the other, if that makes any sense.
I think that makes perfect sense. I often use an analogy of describing when, like, the difference between public relations and marketing. That
Mhm.
using the analogy of chess. So, in one dimension, public relations is a subset of a communication tool alongside maybe advertising, direct marketing, digital, and so on. So, it
Yeah.
exists as underneath, but it also exists above as the corporate being, the total being, the chess player, as
Yeah.
the chess player can. So, I think that makes perfect sense there. That to see it in sort of different levels and in different dimensions, rather than as a binary yes or no on it. So moving on then to the next stage of what we
Mm.
call listen, connect, do. And this is a delightfully simple model that explains how we socially interact, that we listen with every sense of dimensions, your ears, eyes, sense, instincts. You connect what you around you in your world, and you do, and that do could be a development of a concept to a tangible transaction and outcome. And it pumps around with a sort of a constant dynamic feedback loop there. And at the heart of that beating heart is a sense of purpose. So the stronger, the more coherent, more compelling your sense of purpose, the more vibrant the listen, connect, do. And that we live in a world of emergence, not by design. So that and what's emerged is a number of concepts. So sociologists, for example, have come up with identified that to human behavior, that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger, but that also means 1 out of 3 don't. And that's not to make any moral judgment, but to say that there's 2 prime instincts at work in how it would guide how we socially interact: a we led, where you look at the communal collective good first, and me led, which is one of a self-centered approach. And then within that, a word has emerged without any formal definition of this word of comms, and to describe maybe a bigger field of practice than what's previously defined by things like advertising, public relations. So a lot to throw at you there in terms of listen, connect,
Right.
do, we led and me led and comms. Any thoughts there, Viola?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think you're totally right. Is not every business needs to be we led, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a good thing if you are, but again, as I said initially, only if you're kind of buttoned up and you have the ability to be we led and think about the broader issues that society are facing and how your business can authentically try and solve them, right?
Yeah.
And I think, what's interesting is as I said as well, that, because the news cycle is so vast at the moment, and we live in this new world of technology, of social media, of everything being kind of, almost radically transparent now from a business point of view, with people declaring exactly the kind of minutiae of how their businesses run, how their staff are looked after, where their operations are, if they're eco-friendly, if they're not, all of this sort of stuff. Because everything is so unbelievably transparent, this listening, connecting, and doing is incredibly important, and something actually that it kind of ensures that a business evolves essentially. Every year, every kind of week, there's a new thing that a company can jump on or do or change to better themselves as we become more knowledgeable about the world that we live in and kind of what matters and what we are able to do to kind of help it. So I think in terms of driven by these instincts. I think definitely we led and me led is 100% a thing. I don't think I've ever received a brief that isn't like, you know, let's help the broader world and community, or let's help us and let's drive sales, or let's, you know, we want to be famous and drive brand, or we want people to think this about us as a brand. So yeah, I completely agree that, you know, it's that kind of, it is that confidence play. It's also, you know, the authenticity piece is key to its success as well, in terms of, you know, creating that social currency that makes something thrive as opposed to bomb, essentially.
Yeah. And this idea of comms, I think you might have actually in passing used it in describing it. I mean, is that a term you use, and any thoughts about its significance as a label?
Yeah, it's a funny one, comms, isn't it? Because it's used as a kind of clumsy catch-all, and has been for quite a long time. But I think, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because it's communications, and comms is, you know, it's exactly the job that we are doing. Social agencies, social first agencies are doing, advertising agencies are doing. But also, what's interesting in this kind of new modern world of the comms mix, everyone's kind of doing each other's bits now. The line between each are very, you know, are very marred in quite a wonderful way, because, you know, I mean, I very much support the idea of having a specialist as opposed to a generalist, right? In terms of an agency, I think that you know, you play to your strengths, and I think it allows you to do that in terms of specializing into something. But actually, we're seeing more frequently, you know, ad first agencies coming up with brilliant PR ideas because they had them, and what's the point in binning them? So I do think, even though comms does feel very kind of catch-all, it works because that is what we all do, right? We're all communicators. We're all communicating on behalf of brands to ensure that this perception of them within society and that understanding of their purpose is really connecting with their audience. And you know, it's us that's doing the doing on behalf of the business, giving that to the wider world so they can form that perception of what they do, why the brand exists, what the purpose is of said brand. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and then moving on, then we'll talk about step three. And this is really influenced by the work of behavioural psychologists such as the Nobel Prize winning Daniel Kahneman and others, that recognises that people are essentially emotional animals, and then it poses the question: well, how can you effectively manage your social interactions with an emotionally driven animal? But fortunately, it's identified what are known as heuristics or rules of thumb, and 5 key heuristics. The Dublin conversation believes frames what you need to do to achieve in any effective social interaction. And these 5 rules of thumbs are being known and noticed, so that aligns with much of practice of like building awareness. Liked, and not just like Facebook likes or even just effective liking, but liking can be a spectrum from respecting and admiring, as well as also paradoxically, you can like to dislike somebody. So think of someone like well-known celebrities which people sort of engage with. And then trust, how you trust them, and then front of mind, even though you may be well known, because people are essentially lazy, the posh word is cognitive misers, they choose the immediately available option more often, and therefore you need to be front of mind. And lastly, talked about social proof. And if you're not sure of something, what's the word on the street, what's the word you've read in the media and other sources. And so our task is to listen, connect, do, and to achieve outcomes in like known, like, trusted, front of mind, and being taught. And there's no hierarchy here, just the way they're listed there. I just wondering, any thoughts about this at all, whether this does maybe frame any campaign, or if anything's missing?
Well, yeah, so you said that there wasn't a hierarchy, and I do think that there's almost a trajectory to them in terms of the known to talked about. I feel like known obviously is stage one, right? You know, if you get a brief from a new brand, it's drive brand awareness is the kind of core, you know, the core thing that you need to do. People need to understand who the brand is and what they do in order to then like them, so forming an opinion. And I think you're totally right actually about the, you know, kind of, I don't know, being liked and talked about doesn't mean you have to, it's not about being fully liked. You can be disliked. Sometimes there are brands that, you know, are so polarizing that people can't get enough of them and want to kind of know everything about them, but it means they hate them, but it still works in terms of comms and kind of what they stand for. Obviously, you know, trusted, front of mind, talked about really is the one that I think comes last once you've done all of those things, once you've proven yourself to be a competent business who does, you know, whatever you do, and you are thus liked by people, known for your quality, but also known for, you know, successful communications and successful purpose. And then front of mind, you know, again, quite a hard one to achieve, kind of being the front runner, so to speak, in the category, and then obviously talked about as well. So that fame piece as well, which can be done by the smaller brands. It can be known to talked about. You know, we've seen some brilliant examples of kind of unicorn new businesses coming up through the ranks, doing something absolutely brilliant through PR, like the vegan meat brand. They do some just hilarious, you know, absolutely hilarious comms, and I think, I don't know, I you know, as a PR professional, it might be something that I know better than your average punter, but yeah, just so I feel like they all make complete sense. For me, some are more important than other in the work that I do, particularly. I think known is where you start, and talked about is always the ambition, right? Through communications is, you know, that's us doing our job, right? And then front of mind is more kind of sales driven. But yeah, I love Daniel Kahneman. I read Fast and Slow. I think it's a brilliant book. He's very intelligent. I think, you know, it just quickly, actually we're going on to nudge on step 4, so I won't go on to that yet. So I've just seen it. But yeah, no, I think they're not kind of mutually exclusive, those elements. I feel you know, you can have bits of some and be a good solid brand. I think having all of them makes you a killer brand, you know, all killer, no filler. It's just kind of you are then, you know, one of the world's greatest.
I think that's a wonderful insight, because we've never ever questioned why we've listed them in that order. There's not alphabetical or anything. So I think maybe unconsciously you've hit upon, you know, something there about this idea of trajectory. We mentioned the next step then, how identifying what you need to achieve. How do you go about it? And so we're developing a concept here called the opens, which provides, rather than the established PESO model used in our industry of paid, earned, shared, and owned, but opens is fundamentally different, and it regards strategic choices you make, within which may be some of the channel choices you have, but it's a much bigger framework of thinking. And at the heart of that framework of thinking is a transformation of own to include like your own reputation, just being there, and even spending time with people can be a way of earning trust with them. Your own interaction qualities, skills, the decisions you make, the people you keep company with, and so on. And then a further dimension mentioned is about the introduction of nudge. So and really this highlights that nudge of how you influence people's behaviors by making choices easier or harder for them, shows that you can influence people without communicating with them, by influencing their environment. So it's suggesting here that these represent like the range of choices that you have before you, and it's a far more expanded range than maybe the traditional media choices. So again, any thoughts here, Viola, on this?
Yeah, definitely. So I was going to jump in and talk about nudge, but I prefer this. Yeah, well, no, I'll start on the kind of the traditional PESO model. I feel like that's much more functional. This is much more actually emotive and realistic to what actually happens, right? It's kind of, you create a piece of content, so you're owning it. You then, if you need to kind of, you know, propel that further into the big wide world, you then pay for it. But also where we come in as PRs, right, if it's good enough, if it's kind of good enough off its own merit, you earn kudos off it by media writing about it, you know, be that trade media or broader media in the big wide world. But then, you know, nudging as well, so kind of, you know, kind of elbowing people to remember that you've done it, and kind of reposting about it. Or this is often, I mean, very much speaking as a PR professional here, but this is often where we're using influencers, right? So you have a long tail success to how you're interacting with individuals by creating those little brand nudges, which can be that kind of always on function, right, of any brand, which is in PR, it's press office, and also influencer as well, getting people who other people trust, who other people understand to be, you know, good individuals that they follow and like the things of, getting them to share elements of that brand, that purpose, what they're trying to strive for, those key messages. And then onto shared choices, which I think kind of, is slightly less us. But I think nudge theory is something creatively that I use a lot. I mean, I've actually got a book here called The Creative Nudges. I mean, I've got thousands of them in here, but yeah, it's a really fascinating thing, because ultimately what we're always trying to do in comms is we're solving problems, right? We're solving problems that a brand has the ability to do in clever, creative ways. It's creative solutions, and those are all nudges. I mean, whether they're from a kind of purpose, perspective, if we're talking CSR perspective, then that's very much us trying to help the broader world to solve a problem that the community is having that the brand can fix, or beyond that, just something that we've spotted that the problem could be that this is an area of opportunity and we're going to make people laugh. It's fun. And so nudge theory is one that I absolutely love. I think it's brilliant, but it kind of does actually form, if I think about it, the foundation for a lot of the creative work that comes out of the comms profession, that comes out of kind of the various different verticals that fall within that. But yeah, so I think guiding on the open choices is a brilliant way to actually see the different touch points for a campaign. So you creating, you then paying for whatever you want, then earning the kudos, then continuing the drumbeat by nudging. It's actually a really good format for a successful campaign with multiple amplification strands that really helps to elevate that brand message, which conveys brand purpose.
And just using about touch points, excuse my Cockney accent, but have you most inspired idea of thought points that these are one of the things you got to think about first, and then an interplay between those touch points. So a fascinating insight. So we then move on to the sort of step 5, which is that having identified your purpose, having like your listen, connect, do, that you then identify the 5 goals and then the 5 choices how you do that. And this really sort of posits that even though doing that, you need to think even bigger, that you have a responsibility to the wider social environment, which without which you cannot socially interact. If we cannot come together as a society to work on the common challenges, then as a society we face some real existential threats. And so the idea is that existing sort of public relations communications practice, very much based on what's called a two-way communication of like listening and engaging and so on. And we believe maybe there's a third dimension needs to be added, how you need to be recognized and cognizant of the wider social fabric, and that you seek to replenish that social fabric of trust, togetherness, and being able to come together with any social interaction. And likewise, there's a danger that you can pollute and damage that social fabric with malpractice and negative behaviors. I just want any idea about this sort of idea of like regenerative comms, or the idea of regenerative as an added dimension there.
Yeah, no, totally. I feel like I've already nodded to this sort of purpose, just because the word purpose is used often in reference to this through PR. But 100% that, as I said, it's so rare now to receive a brief that doesn't have purpose at its core, because I mean, without using a kind of cliched term, the world is on fire, and brands have the, ability, the stature, the cash, all of that sort of stuff to actually make a tangible difference. But living in such a open and honest and transparent world now, where nothing can be hidden and, everything needs to be right out in the open, it's impossible for people and brands not to do this. And I think in order to gain that trust, that connection, we are, it's a comms professional's responsibility to be listening to, as you say, the zeitgeist or the spirit of the times, and actually that, like, what's happening in the real world, and see if it's something that we can help tackle head on. I think it's completely crucial. And actually, now if we receive a brief in or anything, and a business isn't buttoned up in terms of their sustainability credentials or how they're supporting XYZ member of community, then we often think about not taking it, because you can tarnish your reputation so unbelievably quickly now by not being seen to help, because it's it's, you know, it's expected. It's just the foundation of any good business is that. And so I think this is completely crucial to the success of anyone's core purpose now. It needs to be interlinked with this idea of regeneration and how actually you can help the broader world with your own actions, but also act responsibly. Because if you do that, then you gain that trust, then you gain that sense of community. You're actually seen to be supporting individuals. I think, you know, it's completely vital. And yeah, it's very rare not to see it now, which is brilliant, but there's so far to go.
In what ways? What do you say so far to go? I mean, what are the sort of challenges ahead for people like yourself?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously lots of businesses have had lots of pressure put on them, particularly from a kind of environmental standpoint, right? There's all these stretch goals for 2050. Some people have gone to 2030, 2025, all that sort of stuff, and it's projections. And so actually, you know, it's about reaching those goals faster, because, you know, there's so many reasons why people need to do it faster. And I think people are noticing that. And then also, you know, slightly going back to the point where I think a really important thing for a business is actually at the moment as well, how they treat their employees. I think more so than ever, it has become so unbelievably transparent in terms of how individuals working at a business or a company or a brand or whatever are being treated in their role. And you know, now we have things like, you know, LinkedIn being a social media for your professional life. I mean, people are posting on the daily very emotive posts about how they were let go, or, you know, how they were treated when they were pregnant or when they were bereaved, and it's a really interesting thing. And I think it's a brilliant step change. You know, people don't just look to Glassdoor and look at those terrible reviews anymore. They're actually looking at the individuals, the people that are working at this company. And so you form quite a large opinion about businesses before, you know, you actually even blinked. It's all very out there. And so yeah, I think it's, you know, it's a brilliant thing. I think there's so much regeneration that the business world can do. And as a comms professional, you know, I think there's even been massive step changes that have happened in our profession as well, in terms of, you know, just everything from kind of D&I and making sure that diversity is at the core of everything we do, but also, you know, the individuals we work with, from suppliers to employees at the company. And then also, you know, making sure that we're doing good work in terms of supporting various communities, world issues, and so on and so forth. So it's a big point, this one. There's a lot to do. There's lots of sections that come under regeneration in a funny sort of way. It's kind of, yeah, there's a big picture underneath it.
Yeah. I find what you're saying inspiring, because on the one hand it paints a very big challenge, but I get the sense of people like yourself, and I don't want to use the word enthusiasm in a patronizing way, but like just the sheer vivacity inspires confidence in me and greatly. So thank you for that. So really, having done our 5 steps, it enables you to step outside the existing terms of PR, advertising, and so on, you know, potentially engage with a bigger picture that in some ways codifies and describes what you're already doing in some sense, but hopefully always maybe like a window, give you a scope to, you know, to engage with a wider vision, a bigger picture. So having done the 5 steps, do you feel more confident about addressing what does better look like? Has that been a helpful exercise at all?
Definitely. Do you know what? I actually, yeah, I think it's incredibly useful. It's a very, very useful guide. But I think also, crucially, it just updates some very archaic practices that I think we've all fallen victim to. I know in advertising, there's a lot more, you know, it's been around for a lot longer. There's a lot more models and things like that. And in PR, we don't have as many, but the ones that we do use do feel a bit outdated. And so this is a brilliant way to ensure that our thinking as individuals does actually kind of, you know, respond to the world as it is now, and not when PR was invented and created however long ago. But yeah, I also think it's just, you know, crucially, we should all be asking ourselves, with businesses, with brands we work on, with our own companies that we work at, you know, like, why do we exist? What do we stand for? and how can we make ourselves better? And this is a really nice way, if nothing else, to make us really think about that and actually be a bit more introspective as an industry, and as professionals doing work for other brands as well, who have big status and the ability to really make change and encourage kind of better business practices across the industry.
That's very much appreciated as kind words. I know both of us agree in constructive critiques and being a good friend, constructive friend. Is anything, one or more things, the Dublin conversations should be doing or thinking differently?
No, it's a funny one. I guess I got a bit tripped up on the idea of purpose, but I think I realised that purpose has become a bit of a buzz term, and purpose in a brief to lots of comms professionals will mean purpose in terms of kind of a charity purpose, who you're helping, community purpose and things like that. So I guess maybe a firm definition at the beginning of what purpose means, just for people like me who see purpose every day, and it always means helping X community. We want to do a purpose-led campaign to help members of the X community. Is kind of it becomes a bit buzzy. I think more broadly it feels very kind of clean, and I mean I think it's really good. I'd be fascinated to hear what the other kind of conversations. Obviously
I want to thank you, because I mean you've really brought home to me that purpose exists, and there's a tendency to see it existing just at a tactical level, but I think it sits above strategic as a goal-driven level. And that's a sort of a key thing I've sort of grown from this conversation, that to make that be aware of that distinction and be more explicit in explaining that distinction, because I think that's an extremely profound point. And there's a danger I foresee that we're in a honeymoon period with the idea of purpose, and the danger is it could become toxic, or polluted, or tired, hackneyed, cliched, and so on. And it needs to have as strong a robust theory as possible to make it sort of immune from being hijacked or misused. So extraordinary, you've provoked certainly a profound insight in my thinking there, so I'm very grateful for that. In terms of action steps, is there anything specific we need to be taking here, do you think?
I think just continuing to speak to people and kind of get people's thoughts, particularly from the broader comms mix. I'm sure you are, but making sure that I am a PR, but speaking to someone from advertising, someone from brand, someone, just lots of different individuals that have in-house adverts, everything roles. Because in a funny sort of way, kind of thinking about this conversation, I was thinking to myself, does my sister in advertising think the same thing about me, about purpose than me? Does my boyfriend who works in social, does, all that sort of stuff? It's an interesting thing, because I know we all kind of sing from the same hymn sheet, being comms professionals, but actually, are we all defining this the same? And if we're not, we probably should be, because otherwise it's going to get very confusing.
So as it was an immediate ask for me, so if you can consider connecting us with your sister and boyfriend there, I think that'd be a very, very interesting further conversations there. Viola, massive thanks.